Hey everyone, welcome to the Tom's Hardware 2023 Innovation Awards. This is that time of year when we at Tom's Hardware take a little time out to talk about the most innovative products of the year. These are not just products that were good, not just ones that we recommend people to buy, but products in our tech enthusiast hardware space that have really kind of broken the mold in some way and left a trail for others to follow. Most of these products are things that have come out and we have tested. However, we also leave room for things that are really innovative that were just recently announced and haven't hit the market yet. And for those, we say these are products that are really innovative. We can't yet say, hey, we've tested them and you should buy them, but we can say that they are really breaking new ground in some way. So we've got 25 exciting winners to talk about, and we've got our staff of editors here to talk about the different products. So without further ado, let's get started. I'll be bringing in, I'm Avram Pelch, your editor-in-chief, and I'll be bringing in our different editors to talk about the products that they picked for this list. So this is our first slide. So now I'm going to bring on our deputy managing editor, Paul Alcorn, who is the leading CPU and storage expert probably in the world. I'll say that. And ask him to talk about the Ryzen 7000 series, Ryzen 7000 X3D series. Paul?
Hi, guys. So I picked the Ryzen 7000 X3D series as a whole because they come with, the NVIDIA broadcast is blurring it out, but they come with a groundbreaking new cache technology that actually debuted one generation before on one CPU. And AMD this time around with the 7000 X3D series expanded that out into 3 different CPUs, and 2 of them have cache technology on a multi-chiplet CPU, which is the first time that they have done that on a multi-chiplet CPU. In order to make this work and to make it to where it's affordable, they only put the cache on one of the compute dies. And the real innovative part here occurred with enabling this on these higher core count CPUs is to enable the threads to be directed to the correct chiplet if you're gaming. So AMD did a lot of very smart work with their chipset driver and used Windows already inbuilt features that detect games through the Xbox gaming bar in order to direct those game threads to the one chiplet and give you market-leading gaming performance. These CPUs are faster than anything out there, but at the same time, now you can get more cores. So if you want to do some rendering or game streaming or things of that nature, these CPUs can also handle that. So they come now with either 8 cores and 16 threads, which is the 7800X3D, 12 cores and 24 threads in the 7900X3D, and 16 cores and 32 threads with the 7950X3D. So you have different levels that you can choose. One of the great things is the most affordable model is actually the fastest at gaming. It's the 8-core 7800X3D, which is a fantastic processor for gaming. But the other 2 high core count models are much faster than any Intel CPU on the market. So AMD now, when it comes to sheer gaming performance, they rule the roost. They are right now the leaders. So not only is the 3D stacking technology that they use to put the cache on top of the chiplet groundbreaking, but the software work that they did to bring that to a broader range of CPUs is also equally, if not even more, impressive. So that is why I picked it. The thing as a whole. And then also we come to the T700 SSD. This is an SSD from Crucial that has not actually been released to the market yet, but they did allow us to take it for a spin in a preview. It's a PCIe 5.0 SSD, which promises eventually PCIe 5.0 SSDs will offer twice the speed of PCIe 4.0 SSDs. But right now, the type of flash that they're using to build these drives just isn't fast enough. And there are different speed levels that provide a different amount of performance with each type of drive. Crucial manufactures the flash memory. So, of course, they just so happen to have the fastest flash. It runs at 2,000 megatransfers a second. This is paired with the Phison E26 controller. And this delivers up to 12.4 gigabytes of sequential read and read throughput and 11.8 gigabytes of write throughput. And you also get 1.5 million random read and write IOPS, which is simply fantastic. So right now, this will be when it arrives, it'll be the fastest SSD that you'll be able to buy for quite some time, and not by a small margin. So that's why we chose that SSD.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul. Now we're going to go to managing editor Matt Safford, who's going to talk about some other really cool stuff. Oops, where are we at? Okay, Fractal Design. So, Matt, what can you tell us about the Fractal Design North?
I mean, look at it. It's gorgeous. It was a joy to photograph and to build in. It is, I mean, I think the most obvious innovative thing about it is it's, sort of mid-century modern design, and it's actually using real wood slats in the front. So definitely a different aesthetic for cases that was extremely well received by our reviewer, by myself, and by kind of the industry as a whole. And it's not just the wood. There's no RGB. Definitely have seen a trend away from RGB this year. You can get it in either a mesh side panel or glass, and that's a nice option because for those who really care about performance more than looking at the parts inside the case, right? The front is also fully vented. I think I can pull it off here. So, great airflow, nice big fans. And there's a lot of attention to detail. So as I try to get this back on, but so there are chrome accents on the feet. In this model, it's also available in black with black and brass, I think. But so chrome power button, just a very distinctive, very different look for a PC case. And I think a lot of people, ourselves included, we're really impressed at a different take at this. And, it's not just reviewers and customers that seem sort of interested in this design, because a couple of months after this was announced, Corsair, huge name in the case space, they announced that they were going to start selling wood accessories for some of their existing cases. So it's definitely, seems to be something that's going to become a trend. And I'm really interested to see what gets announced at Computex, because given how well this was received, I feel like, there are probably going to be a few other companies that are going to launch cases with similar looks and designs. So
cool. So next we have up the Corsair RMX Shift. Do you have?
I do. I just have to move to get it.
Now, I'm really excited about this one.
So this one is both interesting and very simple to describe, right? I mean, to anyone who's ever built a computer before or serviced one, all the power connectors, if it's modular or not, are always on the back, right? Which is okay in a lot of cases, just because there's space there a lot of times to stow those cables. But the Shift has the power cables on the side, right? So That is, in some cases, literally, in some cases, no pun intended, it will help with cable routing because you won't have to route everything out the back and then up to where it needs to go, right? And in the larger models, the higher capacity models, there are some extra connections, so you can actually mount a lot of cables either vertically or horizontally. So like they'll, the ribbon cables would be easier to move up or move this way. But I think the main thing is, for those times when you want to get into the case and maybe you need to add an extra PCIe power cable to add maybe a 4090 or, extra SATA power cables, whatever you need. You don't have to remove the entire power supply or try to fish your hand in the back in a mess of cables and figure out where your cable needs to plug in. It's right on the side. It's right there. It's very easy to access. And, I think in some cases it will add a lot of convenience. It won't work in all cases because, if your case is not very wide and the power supply or like butts right up near the back of the case, that's going to be somewhat problematic. If you have, a case with a shroud on the back where the case has to go in, from this side and you don't have access to the side, that's also not going to work. But I think for the majority of cases and the majority of builds, this is a really simple but interesting and innovative design.
Will save your fingers from a lot of pain while you're like save you from some cuts probably. So
yeah, perhaps. Thankfully, most cases have gotten better about most companies have gotten better about the sharpness of the edges of things. So it's, it's still can happen, especially if you're, going into the like $50 sub $50 case area. But it's been a while since I've like severely nicked myself when building something.
So our next one, I believe you also have on hand.
I do. Yes. This is the 2 terabyte Buffalo SSD CUP, which is a flash drive. It is not, as flash drives go, it is not the smallest, but again, it goes up to 2 terabytes. There's been a lot of we've seen 2 terabyte drives in the past from some companies that were insanely expensive. And then we've seen a lot of things on Amazon and AliExpress and other places that claim to be 2 terabyte flash drives that are scams. So we've tested it. I actually have 2 of them because I bought one. It often goes on sale for, less than $150, sometimes much less. And it's fast for a flash drive, not the fastest, but hey, it's 2 terabytes. It's much smaller than even an external SSD. It, gives you several hundred megabytes a second of sequential speed. It's affordable. It'll fit in just about any pocket. It's 2 terabyte flash drive.
Great. Finally, wanted to talk about the MSI Titan, which is MSI Titan GT77HX, which is an awesome laptop.
Yes. So don't have that one with me because that is back to MSI, but it is in a general sense a great and powerful laptop. We tested it with a 4090 and a 13th gen top end Intel CPU. So performance is great. The design is very good. It's a bit understated in a good way. Again, seeing some companies veering away from the extremely flashy gamery stuff, at least in some models. But the major thing about the Titan is, interestingly, when a lot of the competition this year went to an 18-inch screen, MSI stuck with 17 inches, but for a very specific reason. So this laptop has a mini LED panel, which is all the rage right now, and we've tested several laptops at this point, I believe, with mini LED, but this is still the one that performed the best, and it was a very interesting experience. So in testing and reviewing this laptop, I I was using it, photographing it. I, generally liked it. I thought the screen looked good, but as soon as I stopped and started looking at content and playing some games on the laptop, the screen blew me away. So, I mean, my main monitor that I'm looking at right now is a 55-inch LG OLED TV. I use it every day and I love it. The screen on this MSI laptop, like, objectively looks better than that. It's brighter. The blacks are just as black thanks to the mini LEDs. It is just a very good, very powerful laptop with the best screen possibly I've ever seen in a laptop, period.
Yeah, and also I think it's really great that you can get that like desktop like typing experience with the cherry mechanical switches.
Absolutely. Yes, it is another thing that every time I see it in a laptop, and it's far too frequent, but there are a few companies that do it regularly. Alienware is another one. It's it blows everything else away, right? I mean, it's mechanical. Like I would personally prefer blue switches because I do more productivity than gaming, but even with those reds, it's definitely a much more satisfying feeling than any other non mechanical keyboard on a laptop. So it's
Yeah.
a lot of things. There are a lot of very good things about this laptop, and then maybe the best screen I've ever seen. Right. So that, and I like, it's been a long, I've been doing this. I've been reviewing things for 15 years, and it's been a long time since I was kind of far along in a product, and then I started paying attention to one specific feature, and it changed entirely how I felt about the product. And the display in the Titan absolutely did that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Matt. Oh,
Yep.
no, wait, one more. One more
yes.
thing. The Team Group Siren Duo.
Yes. So this is an all-in-one. There are many all-in-ones, and apart from innovations in the pump and fans and things like that, there haven't been a lot of major changes in a long time. But this Siren from Team Group adds a cooling for another device in the loop, which is I find interesting because, like, these things are called all-in-ones, right? Well, this thing actually cools more than one thing. So it's designed to cool the CPU and designed to cool an SSD. Now there's debate, and it's questionable whether most and possibly almost any SSDs really need cooling and active cooling, unless you're really hammering it with something. But it's also good timing because we are, just as Paul just talked about, the PCIe 5 SSDs are starting to come out, and a lot of those come with fans or large heat sinks. So this, if you're putting together a system and you plan to get a very fast drive, or you plan to have a very fast drive that you will be hammering on for several minutes or hours at a time, I think this is an interesting product that covers two cooling bases in a way that before this you could never do without doing some kind of custom cooling loop. So you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Matt.
Yep.
Now we're going to hear from Denise Bertacci, who is our 3D printing expert. Hey, Denise.
Hello.
We have a couple of really awesome. We have a few really awesome 3D printers. I'm so excited about. So excited about this one. What can you tell us about why the PRUSA MK4 is such an innovative printer?
Well, okay, people who are fans of PRUSA have been waiting for a long time for the latest one. Is this too loud? It's actually pretty quiet for a 3D printer. They have loaded this thing with all of the bells and whistles that we've been wanting in a PRUSA, or just any 3D printer at all. It has a load sensor on it instead of the pin to probe that the old PRUSAs had. And that allows it to do this perfect first layer. In fact, I've got it sitting over there, but it's absolutely, it will print the first layer down like a beautiful piece of paper. And it's just perfect. Anyway, but they put in a bigger gear on the extruder. They're calling it a neck extruder. So it really grabs the filament. And then the nozzle is now, they kind of took a page from the Revo over E3D, and it's a one-piece nozzle with the feed and the heat break, and then the nozzle. It's all sealed so that when you take that out, and you can take it out with like 2 screws over here. I mean, not while it's running, obviously, but you can hot swap that nozzle, and you don't have to worry about any loose parts where filament might come out with a cheaper printer. A lot of times on the cheaper printers, you have to worry about getting the fit just right, or else filament's going to come oozing out of it. So there's just they just upgraded like 90% of the machine, and yet it still kind of looks the same. And that's because PRUSA wants people who own their old printers to be able to upgrade to this printer. So you can actually buy this printer, or you could buy a kit and make your old MK3 practically into one of these. So this is just, I'm just tickled. Oh, and it's got Wi-Fi. That's the other thing. So
yeah, one thing a lot of folks don't know is most 3D printers don't come with Wi-Fi.
No.
This one comes with Wi-Fi. It also has, although we haven't gotten one in for testing yet, a multi-material unit that you can attach to it so that you can print in several colors at once, which is a big deal. And it can print on all kinds of crazy surfaces. Like I've seen videos of people printing on cardboard with it, which is not recommended, but they can do it. So it's
yeah. And there's another thing with it's based on Marlin, but PRUSA has their own team of engineers working on their firmware. I actually got to interview Joseph PRUSA shortly after the release, and he said that with their firmware, they started off with Marlin years ago, and they have been innovating it, so that it's further and further from the real thing. And then they're like, hey, Clipper looks really good, but instead of just, they just like borrowed ideas from Clipper and brought it in. So they weren't able to release it. I think they were wanting to get this out quickly, but it has elements of Clipper in there. So in about a month, this thing's gonna fly. So they're going to release. So if you buy the machine now, don't worry about it. They'll have a firmware update when they get it all, all their little ducks in a row. And this thing will have input shaping and pressure advance.
Which, for those who don't know all those terms of 3D printing, means it will be like print 5 times faster than it does now. So speaking of high-speed printing, let's talk for a minute about the Bamboo P1P, which is a real game changer in terms of print speed. So what can you tell us about the Bamboo P1P?
Okay, the first one, the kind of the big brother of the P1P was just the Bamboo X1 Carbon. Came out of nowhere last May, and it's a Core XY printer, which is super fast compared to our little bed slingers over here. So Core XY is pretty fast anyway, but they put kind of the same sort of thing with the load sensors. So this can also do a perfect first layer. And this one has the input shaping, and it came, and the accelerometer and everything. So these printers just go stupid fast. It runs at 500 millimeters a second as just its normal thing. And then when you set up the print and send it over here, you have turbo boost on here basically. And it literally has ludicrous mode. So you can do like a 17-minute benchy on this. And it looks pretty good.
Yeah, so that is benchy. That's a common print that people use to benchmark their printers. And that printed in 17 minutes. On a regular printer, that might take an hour.
On like an Ender 3, it would be an hour and 47 minutes. On the fast printers, you're doing pretty good if you can get it to 47. So, and then the 20, Prusa is saying like their MK4 will be able to do a 20-minute benchy once they get the input shaper and everything on it, which compensates for the speed.
Yeah, so that's the next big thing in 3D printers is speed, because
and probably what's really cool about the P1P here is that they came out with that X1 Carbon, and it was $1,200, $1,400, I believe. And this one is basically the same thing. It doesn't have the LiDAR camera on it, but they just stripped it down. So this shell here, I printed this myself. So it comes as just an open frame printer. And then part of the fun part with these is that you can print your own covers. And they helped me out, and their engineer made this one for us. But then I printed it here on this printer. And it's not, I mean, I did print it out of PET. So it's not to make it a enclosed printer, like for printing ABS and whatnot. It just makes it stylish. So, and then of course you can add the AMS unit, which is the 4-color unit. This doesn't come with it. This is an extra part. But if you want, this is a lot less money than buying the full blown X1 Carbon. So it's a really good deal, and it's a super fast printer.
Yeah, awesome. Finally, I wanted to talk about a printer you don't have in front of you, but what we reviewed, the Neptune 3 Max, which breaks some new ground just by being huge for a reasonable price.
Yes. Okay, the Max. Now, actually, there was 3 Neptune 3 printers. One that was like a 200 by 200, which is about the size of this guy over here. Your small or average printer. And then there was a medium sized one that was like 300 by 300 on the bed. And the Max is 420 by 420, which is monstrous. And it was only like $470, I believe, which is just insane for the amount of printer that you're getting.
Yes. And it's also a really high quality printer.
Yes.
You're getting lots of good features like direct drive.
It's got the direct drive. It's got the PEI coated flex plate, which was insane. Also, just that large. You can make little lightning noises when you're not using it. Anyway, but it's direct drive, and the PEI sheet is just really helpful because, like, I had a different large format printer that had a glass bed, and I had to use a hammer and a chisel to remove prints all the time. And with the Neptune Max, you just flex and it pops right off. So, and that's an amazing printer. And for the price, it's, you just got to grab one. The only problem is that they're hard to find in stock because everybody's just grabbing them up as soon as they're released. What
are some of the large objects that you have printed with it?
Well, what we have on this screen there's the, that's a giant, gosh, I don't know, she's 600. It's a Louis B. Dragon. All right, hang on one second here.
It'd be 500 millimeters tall because that's the max height of this.
Okay. I made this trash can. It's so big. Anyway. I mean, yeah, I know printing a trash can with your 3D printer is kind of silly, but I mean, this came off of the Max. So,
but like that's big enough to really use.
So that's the other thing. It handles TPU great.
Yeah, so that's really key because a lot of 3D. One of the big problems with a lot of 3D printers is if you want to print something large, you can't do it, and so it limits what you can do. So having this amount of size allows you to print something like a helmet or a sword or things for cosplay.
Yeah, there's a lot of cosplayers who. They start off with like an Ender 3, and then they realize they can't print a helmet on it unless they split it into little pieces and glue it back together. So on the Max there, you can print the entire helmet. You can print a shield on that thing. It's just massive.
So if you know Captain America and he's had to hand over his shield to Tony Stark, you can print him a new one. Yep. Although the filament is not quite vibranium.
Yes.
But we do have a list of best filaments that are not vibranium. Anyway, maintained by Denise. So thank you so much, Denise. These are some awesome printers. Now we're going to go to Jared to talk about the most innovative graphics card of the year. So, Jared, let's talk. Jared is our senior editor. He covers graphics cards and storage. He knows so much about graphics cards, and he picked the RTX 4090 as the most innovative graphics card of the year. How come?
I mean, really, there's no true competition here if you're talking about innovation. Like AMD, their new 7900 series is faster and better than their previous gen, but it doesn't really add anything new. With the 4090, it's a big step faster than the previous gen, and it added new features like DLSS 3's frame generation. It also has shader execution reordering, opacity micro maps, and displacement micro meshes. I think I've got those terms right. So it's got some new features that are useful in executing code and graphics. Beyond that, like, it's the fastest in gaming, no holds barred. It doesn't even really hit its stride until 4K gaming. I mean, in ray tracing it does, but like if you're doing rasterization, you have to run it at 4K to actually push the graphics card to its limit. At 1440p, it might only be like 5 to 10% faster than the next fastest card. And then at 4K, it's like 20% faster, sometimes more. In terms of other use, though, like AI. AI is this hot topic with things like ChatGPT. You can run larger language models on a 4090 because it's got 24 gig of VRAM. It's got fast VRAM in it. In AI testing, like Stable Diffusion benchmarks, I believe it was almost triple the speed of AMD's fastest solution. So, you know, it's the do everything graphics card. Yes, it's expensive. No, not everyone needs one, but if you want the best, like, this is what it is. The 4080, the step down, it costs, 25% less, and it's 25% slower. The next step down to the 4070 Ti, same thing. So it's like you're not really saving money. Well, you're not really getting a substantially better value by going to the lower tier cards because they cut performance just along with the price. So 4070 is a good card as well, has the same features, but now you're looking at 3080 performance plus DLSS 3. So really, this monster is your next generation, truly next generation graphics card. The worst part, so this is a card, the worst part, the thing that just, it's so sad that you had to do this, and this caused problems, and they were melting. I'm still not convinced that the melting was entirely user error. I think we will still continue to see people on occasion where it's like, just over time, these connections can come a bit loose or flake out. There's a lot of power to put through a small connector. Good, bad, we're stuck with the 16-pin connector from NVIDIA until the next gen, and we'll probably, judging by what NVIDIA has done in the past, I don't think we're going to see the end of them using 16-pin connectors and adapters anytime soon. Maybe when we get the future, whatever comes after ATX 3.0.
Great, thank you, Jared. Now we're gonna go to senior editor Andrew Friedman, who's going to talk about some really amazing products that he's had the opportunity to try out. So what can you tell us about the MacBook Air M2?
Hi, Avram. So yeah, the MacBook Air M2, look, Apple probably didn't need to redesign the MacBook Air. It's like one of the most popular laptops you see in public today, and it was before the redesign. I mean, the fanless design with M1, that was the same as the old Intel design, was a hit. But the new M2 redesign really feels like it was made for a chip, like it was made for the post-Intel era. And I feel like it really signals, hey, like our really popular laptop, we've left Intel behind. Now, there's still one big Intel desktop left, but that's neither here nor there. But the MacBook Air's design also has like a whole bunch of new features. Some of them are bringing back things that should never have left, like MagSafe, which is the magnetic charger that plugs in. And then if you trip over the wire instead of sending your laptop flying off your desk, it unplugs, and you haven't destroyed your $1,200 investment. So I was glad to see that come back. There was a much needed 1080p webcam. Apple did put a little notch in the screen to do it, but you're not actually losing any screen real estate. Apple never left 1610. I know a lot of companies this year are going back to it, but in this case, there's actually a little extra screen real estate above the 1610 where the notch goes. I don't love the notch. I find it a little distracting, but if that's what they want to do to get a 1080p webcam in there, I'll take it. I also appreciate that Apple brought over the full-sized function keys in the keyboard from the Pro line. They look great, they feel great, and a lot of Windows machines and older MacBook Airs used half-height keys that were harder to use. You still get, a top-class haptic touchpad. The battery lasts forever. Some new colors, and even some new charger options, like a dual charger that lets you plug in your phone as well as your laptop, which is kind of nice, as long as you're willing to let everything charge a little bit slower. And you have this laptop that is still very familiar, but is now really, and it still feels iconic, but it also feels like it's a massive upgrade. Perhaps the one downside about it is that Apple did not actually get rid of the M1 version from the market. They let that keep the $999 price range, and then they put the M2 Air starting at $1199. So that will put it a little more out of the price range for budget-conscious consumers. But in general, this is a laptop that was great and became even greater through all of the small changes they made to when they got rid of Intel and made a design strictly around Apple Silicon. Abram, I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Speaking of things that last forever, let's talk about the Framework Laptop 16, which could last forever in the way that sort of, a desktop lasts forever when you keep changing parts.
Sure. So the Framework Laptop 16 was announced just a little bit earlier this year. And we actually don't know a ton about it, but what we do know about it is super cool. So it's probably coming later in the year, probably towards the fall. And Framework had started with its 13-inch laptop, now called the Framework Laptop 13, and those had these changeable port modules, and that was really cool. And the fact that you could pair that with replaceable main boards that they've now supported for 3 generations, like that was even better. But the Framework Laptop 16 is taking it all and adding even more upgradability and customizability. Specifically, the Framework Laptop 16 is bringing in customizable graphics. There's an expansion bay in the back. The laptop will actually change thickness to accommodate it. And we don't know who the partner is. Intel, NVIDIA, AMD. They haven't said. Intel's my secret guess, but that's completely a guess. No one's told me otherwise. And if Framework actually pulls this off, it's going to be a feat that a number of other major gaming companies have said they wanted to try or have tried and largely floundered on, because you often had to change an entire motherboard to get the graphics card to change. In this case, they're doing it over PCIe. So we're going to see if that works. But if it does, it's going to be really cool. And if you want to use integrated graphics, that same expansion bay is going to work for other types of PCIe modules, as long as somebody makes them. It's unclear if Framework will make them, if it's expecting makers to make them. They've demoed the possibility of using the PCIe X interface for a dual M2 SSD to add 16 terabytes of storage to the laptop. So that's something you can do. The laptop 16 is also going to have these input modules. Basically, they said they did sort of market research, and 50% of laptop users at this size like having a number pad, and the other 50%, which is me, prefer not to have them. And here they're going to say, we're going to give you a choice. And you'll be able to remove keyboards and put on number pads or extra screens or little mini LED RGB lights just because you can. We don't know exactly which ones they're going to ship, but again, you'll be able to make that happen, or makers will be able to use them, or perhaps, maybe partners will come up and just sort of start making accessories. But the fact that you can choose, I want a number pad, I don't want a number pad, that sounds something that's something that sounds really cool. I'm looking forward to trying it, and I'm hoping that it feels really seamless with the chassis. But this was just taking everything that Framework did with the laptop 13, which was the ports and the motherboard. Those are all staying. You can use all those. You can bring them from your 13. And it's just adding a ton more to it. Kind of sounds like the original laptop on steroids. And they're not calling this a gaming laptop, but it sounds like it definitely could. And we're really looking forward to finding out more about it, what components they're putting in it, how much it's going to cost, and when it comes out. But just the possibilities got it on our list here.
Fantastic. I want someone to make a keyboard with mechanical keys and a pointing stick that I can swap in. I won't hold my breath. So let's talk about, you mentioned dual screens before. Let's talk about a laptop that's coming that has dual screens.
Sure. So the Yoga Book 9i, this really wowed us at CES. It's not out yet. We're expecting it to launch in June around $2,100. And it is two screens. This is a kind of foldable we haven't really seen yet. When Lenovo, did the X1 Fold, which was a folding screen, sort of like Samsung smartphones. And we've seen Asus do one of those too. But this is sort of going back to, I guess, like the Surface Neo vision. For those of you who remember the canceled Surface Neo, was going to be a two-screen Surface. This is kind of that, but in Lenovo form. So it's going to be two 13.3-inch screens, and it's just going to close into a clamshell like any other petite Ultrabook. So you're going to have these like 2880 by 1800 displays, which I like this idea. My hope from short amount of time with it is that it will help keep me more organized than having a foldable. Like, look, several people on Tom's Hardware staff already use multiple monitors on their desktops. So in theory, this could be really cool on a laptop.
Yeah,
Lenovo's,
no doubt.
So
I'm looking at 4.
Exactly. So Lenovo's going 13th gen Intel Core i7 U series, up to 16 gigabytes of RAM, 1 terabyte PCIe SSD storage. That's all, pretty plain. Like, that's sort of what we're expecting. Look, there's some things about this that I'm a little worried or questioning. It's things like the fact that there's an origami style stand that's going to hold it up, or that the keyboard is separate from it. But I just keep thinking about the potential of having sort of two screens in the footprint of one laptop. And we're really looking forward to trying that when it comes out in June.
Fantastic. So another thing that you chose for your awards is completely different from laptops, but really cool, which is the DualSense Edge. And you have one of those, right?
I do. I've got it right here. And so, look, this is the original DualSense, and the DualSense Edge has more of its tuxedo thing going on. The DualSense Edge here has a couple things that make it really interesting. I mean, A, it feels better in the hand. There's this cushioning inside the grip, so it feels better in the hand. And there's these customization options. On the back, there's little levers for extra buttons that you can remap in software. So whether you have a disability or just, you don't want to take your hands off of the joysticks, you can do that. And the thing is that Microsoft has done a lot of that in its Pro controllers, and we've seen a lot of other companies emulate it. This is the only real official one made by Sony for PlayStation. And the coolest thing I've seen it do is that you can actually replace the joysticks. So if the joysticks have drift and you need to get rid of them, you don't have to throw out a $200 controller. And $200 is a lot for a Pro controller, though that is often what the market commands. So I can actually show you that here. There's a switch on the back right here. And when you flip that, this plastic piece comes off. And you'll see that there's a lever on each side of the joysticks. And this one, I have a taller dome because I like it for, first-person shooters to have more control over my motion. While on the left side, I like to keep the standard. Either one, doesn't really matter. They just pop off. But if you want to remove it, you just lift the lever, like I'll do here. It clicks, and you can just pull out the joystick module. That's it. And then you can buy another one. I believe it's $20 off the top of my head. And you just pop it back in there the same way. And of course, doing it on camera, it makes it look harder than it is, but I promise it's really easy. There you go. You snap it back in, you put the cover on, and now your controller is in full working order again. Now, to some degree, that's a little bit of a tacit admission that the PlayStation controllers can eventually suffer from drift, but it's a far more innovative solution than having to throw out a whole controller and buy a new one, because nobody wants to do that, especially when you spend so much on it. I could show you a few of the other customization options. I mean, There's also a second sort of lever if you want to place in the back. I prefer the shorter half domes because they don't get in the way of my fingers. There's multiple size joysticks, and there's also a very long braided USB cable that comes in the case with a lock that will literally lock it to the controller. Like if you attach this little doohickey, it will not come off. So if you accidentally pull on the controller in the heat of the moment, it won't come out. So for people who really want to play wired because of faster response times, you can do that. I think it's a little extreme. You do get shorter battery life, which is not great, but I guess with everything they're doing in here, to some degree that makes sense that you get that they needed. There's not as much room for a battery. But I think, short of switching to Hall effect joysticks or something that doesn't actually break, just the idea that you can swap, like that they made this Pro controller with some degree of repairability in mind, which is perhaps one of the most important things I think of when I look at anything these days, means that they did something here that's innovative and important. And I'm glad that in what could have just been a Pro controller with a few extra buttons and doohickeys, that they actually went out of the way to say, hey, like, let's make this something that people can keep using for a long time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andrew. Now we're going to have Associate Les Pounder come on and talk about a couple of really awesome maker products. Brandon is coming up soon. But right now we're going to talk about the Pinecell, which is a very innovative soldering iron. What can you tell us about this, Les?
Well, first things first, it's $26. So that's nothing for soldering iron. For context, that is a $10 soldering iron that I got from Amazon a while back. It's good, but this is a lot better. So, Pinecell V2, temperature controlled soldering iron. It goes from 0 to 450 degrees C. I'll convert that for you. 842 degrees Fahrenheit in 15 to 20 seconds. It heats up really fast, and you can replace the tips. So take a tip off, obviously not when it's hot. Go on AliExpress and buy a load of separate tips, plug them in. So you've got fine tip, chisel tip, whatever you need, plug it in, and away you go. You can solder away with a fully temperature controlled iron for $26. It's got a RISC-V processor inside it, which it doesn't really mean a lot for soldering iron. It just means you can update the firmware yourself and put custom profiles for the iron. So if you want to solder at a certain temperature, say doing some precise work, some SMD work perhaps, you can set the iron's temperature, press a button, and it'll go straight to that temperature. And it's all done via a text file and a piece of firmware. Super simple. But most of all, if you look in the barrel there, you've got two connections. You've got USB-C and a DC 5525 barrel jack. So you can power it in two different ways. So if you're on the go somewhere and you've got a USB-C power bank, plug it in and you can solder wherever you are. DC 5525 when you're at home, you've got a reliable power source. And it just works. And I've got the previous version of this, Pinecell V1. This is slightly shorter, but all the tips are compatible. And if you've got tips for TS101 or TS100, yes, I have lots of soldering irons with me tonight. You can plug them in and away you go. It's just a great little iron. It's comfortable to use. It's small enough, so if a child wants to learn soldering, they can. They're not dealing with a great hulking grey iron, which I'll just get another prop. There you go. You can see it's a lot neater. It's more like, obviously, Pinecell, more like a pencil for children to hold. Just a bit easier.
No doubt. So now we have another really cool maker product that I also have one of right in front of me, which is the Tufti 2040. I'll show you. I'll briefly show mine. This is really cool because this Pimoroni makes so many great things that are like fun for makers to do. But this is a badge that you can wear. You can program it to. I mean, it doesn't have to be a badge, but you could like put it on a lanyard, wear it as long as you can plug it in. What are some of the cool things that you have done, Les, with the Tufti 2040?
Tufti 2040 it's a great piece of kit. So there's an overhead shot of a live one right now. Hello. So RP 2040 controls it. So that's the system on a chip from Raspberry Pi. And yeah, all right, it is a name badge. That's a bit boring, isn't it, really? It's going to say at a conference who you are. You can put some cool stuff on it, but you can do lots of cool things with it. So let's just load up some code. We can have wavy text if we want, like the old demo scene from the 80s. You can have text going across the screen to say who you are. Or you could do something a bit more interesting. If I just stop this code now and load the next one, we can travel back in time to when the Atari VCS 2600 was the dominant computer for games consoles. And now I'm going to attempt to play River Raid upside down on a camera.
If you played this game when it first came out, you're officially old.
Thanks.
Which I am, which I did.
But we had the creator of this game on a few weeks ago on the Pinecast, and it's just a novel way of showing what can be done with such low-spec hardware. Now, compared to a VCS 2600 from the 1970s, it's a supercomputer. But to modern-day stuff we've got on our desks, it's not. It's just a tiny little microcontroller with a limited amount of RAM, 264K of RAM, and about 2 meg of storage. So it's not a lot, but you've got this name badge. That's also a games console. It can be a QR code generator. Give it a URL. It can spit out a badge, a URL, a QR code, sorry. But also, we've got stuff on the back. I'll just turn this over. Obviously, we've got the cyber squirrel there, Tufti himself. We've got breakouts for connecting to standard components. So just a bit of soldering work there, perhaps with your Pinecell. Or you can plug in via a STEMMA QT port, which is upside down on my shot. There it is. So STEMMA QT are these boards, and I've got one to hand here, which have sensors, inputs, that sort of thing. Plug them in, load a bit of code, and you've got a temperature sensor running on Tufti, showing live temperature data, or it could be showing gravitational forces, acceleration forces, all on the screen. So it's a data device as well, rather than just being a badge. So good fun. And also, if you want to power it, you've got some little power connections on the back for a AA battery pack or LiPo batteries. Obviously, you can't charge them with this board, but you can charge them externally, plug it in, and it'll last for a while. I wore this at a conference last year for a good 7 hours with my name badge just scrolling across for a bit of fun, and it lasted all day.
Awesome. That is really awesome. I've been planning to wear one around the office. I just have to find the appropriate cool thing to put on it. So I'm inspired. Now, thank you, Les. Now we will have Brandon Hill, senior editor Brandon Hill, come talk about some really cool stuff that he picked out. Let's start by talking about the Alienware EW2524H.
Yeah, that's a mouthful. This is the world's first 500 hertz desktop monitor on the market. And it's a 25-inch IPS panel, which is, a little bit on the small side, but, some people like that. And a resolution of 1080p. And it might seem like a low resolution, but in order to push 500 hertz, you have to make some compromises there. It's 480 hertz native, but 500 hertz overclocked. And if you've got like an RTX 4090, you can really push this thing. We were able to get between 450 to 500 frames per second with the 4090. So it's pretty nice there. It's got RGB lighting zones on the back if you're into that kind of thing. And also, of course, you've got AMD FreeSync and NVIDIA G-Sync support for low input lag. And we noticed excellent contrast and very good image quality across the board with this monitor. And only real downside is pricing. It's a little bit over $800, but you're getting a lot for that price with this monitor and the speed compared to, 360 hertz peers in this category.
Yep. So talking about something that's a little bit smaller but breaks out of the screen, the Acer Spatial Labs View. Why did you pick that?
Well, like I said, 15.6-inch monitors, portable monitors are a dime a dozen these days, but this one has a 4K resolution, which in itself is, very good if you need to, expand your desktop space on your laptop. But this thing has glasses-free 3D support. So basically, you're seeing 2 images with your eyes. So you have splits it into 1080p per eye. So you got stereoscopic imagery. And we tested it with God of War and a Kena Bridge of Spirits. And the effect that you see with that is just amazing. You can actually feel like you're in the 3D world. And there's also the Spatial Labs Experience app. So you can actually take 2D video and convert it to 3D video and also get that same immersive experience with your video. And again, like I said, this is a great productivity monitor with the 4K resolution. And it's not too expensive. I mean, a little under $1,000. And like I said, you get a great glasses-free experience.
Great. Now this is a monitor that literally you can bend.
Yeah, it has two grab handles on the side, so you can actually have it as a flat panel, or you can bend it to an 800R curve. You know, some people are trying to decide, do I want flat panel or do I want curved? Well, you can have both here. Have your cake and eat it too. It measures 45 inches across with a WQHD resolution, and of course, 240 hertz refresh rate. So that's pretty good as well. AMD FreeSync, NVIDIA G-Sync support, and 2 HDMI, 1 display port. It's got you covered. And it's an OLED, so you have those really inky blacks and just great color representation all around.
Great. Now this router really blew me away when we saw it at CES, because it does something no router has ever done. Tell us about the MSI Radix BE22000.
Well, it's going to be one of the first Wi-Fi 7 routers to hit the market later this year. So it'll have 22 gigabits per second of combined bandwidth across all the bands. But you know, that's the basics. But the most important thing here is those, you can see those 4 antennae right there. They rotate automatically to give you the best performance for your clients. MSI, they weren't really forthcoming on how exactly it's going to improve the performance or how much it's going to improve performance by, but these antennae are going to rotate. They're going to we'll see how that works, but yeah.
I mean, we've never seen that before, and even if the rotating antennae, which is something that is, like, as far as I know, never been done before, certainly not with Wi-Fi 7, which has not been out yet. But then you add Wi-Fi 7 on top of it. This is going to be incredibly fast. So
yes, we can't wait to test it out.
Yeah, we can't wait to try that. Thank you, Brandon. So now we're going to talk about some awesome peripherals with senior editor Sarah Jacobson-Purell. Hey, tell us about this, which I love because it has our logo on it.
Well, this picture has our logo on it. But actually, I was going to show it to you, and I have changed the logo to my concerned Pikachu. But yeah, no, this is a great wireless gasket mount keyboard. It's a gaming keyboard that's hot swappable, which is actually something that's pretty rare in gaming keyboards, especially mainstream gaming keyboards. But it's got, both 2.4 gigahertz wireless and Bluetooth, but it also comes with all of these accessories, which is really kind of the coolest thing about it, because, there's a lot of gamers out there who love their gaming equipment, but then there's a lot of keyboard enthusiasts who love their keyboards. And you don't really see like the two sort of meet very often. So they've included sort of this home like lubrication kit that lets you, like lube your switches and sort of like really make this keyboard like your own and really sort of get into that sort of enthusiasm part. So it includes like lubricant, includes, like a switch puller and a keycap puller and like this little station where you can like take apart the switches and everything. And that all comes with it. So that's really kind of the innovative part of this keyboard, I guess. because I mean, it's a great keyboard in general, but there are a lot of great keyboards out there. But it's really this like extra kit that brings it all together.
Yeah, that is really awesome that they've taken things that are normally in the enthusiast, like make your own keyboard market, and brought it to a place where like, regular gamers can really start to learn about and decide about lubricating.
Yeah, and sort of like get into that enthusiasm part, because I mean, gamers aren't necessarily typing as much as keyboard enthusiasts are, but they're on their keyboards a lot. It's a big deal. So.
Yep. So speaking of things that are really productivity based rather than gaming, we have a couple webcams that we chose to recognize this year. Tell us about the Insta360 Link.
So this is Insta360 is a 360-degree action camera company. So this is their first webcam. And as you can see, it's mounted on like this gimbal that kind of moves around because it has things like AI tracking in it. It also has, like a tracking mode that will move if you're dancing or if you're, I don't know, doing a TikTok thing. So it'll track you and keep you in frame. So what was really great about that camera was that the auto exposure and the auto white balance, which is something that webcams just do a terrible job with, which is kind of understandable because everyone's lighting is so different, and also like when we're on webcams we're right in front of like computer screens and that messes everything up. But like the Insta360 Link is probably the only webcam that I've ever used where I didn't have to go in and sort of like do a bunch of tweaking to the settings, and that is like that's just such a big deal. It does it's a 4K webcam, so it's one of those offensively high definition webcams. It records video at 30 frames per second, and it's got all these like fancy modes because it moves around. It doesn't have a privacy shutter, but it does go into like a sleep mode where the camera faces down when it's not on. So I don't love that, but it's better than just nothing at all.
Great. So this we have another webcam this year that was really awesome, and it's fitting that there are some great webcam innovations because after a couple of years in which webcams became more and more important with more people working from home, we're starting to see more actual innovation after years of really stagnation in this space. So what's special about the Elgato Facecam Pro?
All right, so this webcam is actually the first webcam that records in 4K 60 frames per second, which is most of the webcams that we have that are 4K, they all record in 30 frames per second, which is good. But 60 frames per second is really what you need if you're going to be doing like sort of action things or things with a lot of fast movement. So, I mean, that's kind of the main innovation there. It's a pretty big webcam, but it's actually very lightweight. So it's not as heavy on your monitor, although it takes up a lot of space. It also does not have a privacy shutter, which I do not love. But it's actually too bad that this one doesn't have the built-in gimbal, because it would be great for things like sports, or I don't know what people take videos of themselves doing, racing or whatever, any sort of fast action, because it's very static, but you can take it with you. So that's really the main innovation there, is that 4K 60 frames per second. Not that most regular people are going to really want that, because first of all, most web conferencing applications and stuff like that, they do a maximum of like 720p or maybe 1080p, but for the most part you're not going to get that 4K resolution anyway. And then as far as like 60 frames per second goes, I mean, it's a very, I want to say like it's just not as important as like 30 frames per second when it comes to filming. As we know, 30 frames per second is really like the cinematic frame rate. So I don't think most people are going to be using it, but for the people who do want to use it, this is the webcam that, well, it's the only one that you're going to get. So. Oh, you're muted.
Finally, we wanted to talk about the Razer Death Adder V3 Pro, which is an absolutely amazing mouse. What can you tell us about that?
So I actually don't have this one with me because I gave it to my friend who plays a lot of first-person shooting games, and she won't give it back because it's too good. This is Razer's latest iteration. They did this total redesign of their Death Adder gaming mouse. As you can see, well, it doesn't actually look that different, although you can see there's a lot less of a flare. The original Death Adder was very flared at the top. And it doesn't look that different, but whatever they did, the ergonomics in this thing are amazing. So I'm not actually a big lightweight mouse person. I'm not really a big, because I like to have mice with a ton of buttons. And I had this thing on my desk and my hand just kept moving toward it. I couldn't stop myself from using it. It just felt so good. It is pretty lightweight. It's not the lightest mouse ever, but it's one of the lighter ones. It's 63 grams, 64 grams if it's white because the paint weighs an extra gram. But it just feels really good. They did a lot. When I first talked to them about it, they were, wowing me with all these. They were like, "Oh yes, these next generation ergonomics. It will feel so great." And I was like, "Okay, guys, I'm sure it's gonna feel, but it feels so good. This mouse is amazing."
Yeah, that is absolutely fantastic. So much great innovation this year. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
So those are our 25 awards. You can, if you don't have a photographic memory or want to rewatch this video over and over, we actually have these as an article. The article is at this address, but you don't need to right now to know to go to tomshardware.com/news/tomshardware-innovation-awards-2023, because you could just go to our homepage at tomshardware.com and our 2023 Innovation Award winners article is right there. So we thank all of you for watching and listening, and please check out the innovation doesn't just happen once a year; it happens throughout the year, and we take time to recognize it all year round. But this is just our occasion to say, hey, these from the last year were the absolutely most innovative products that we saw. We'll be keeping an eye out for 2024, and we'll see you all later. Bye, everyone.